Interesting. If you go back to the moon landing, it was really well designed.
It's not a TED Talk, is it? We go a little bit longer than that. But this is a stellar crew, and I urge you to read what they do. Jim, you just came back from the North Pole. Jim, you just came back from the North Pole. Something like that. Geeta's been very visible with her responsibilities with the International Monetary Fund. Mazzucato's a versatile machine. She brought along her book, and what's great about this mission economy, Matt Damon has just signed for the movie 2024. But seriously, I'll mention some things along the way to advance your understanding of growth, which I think it's important to leave the panel today with a desire to understand this mystery. Somebody called Stan Fisher the North Star of economics. Olivia Blanchard did that the other day. But there's a guy named Chad Jones. I can't remember if he's at Berkeley or Stanford. He goes back and forth every 10 years.
It's back at a level very close to what it was just before the financial crisis. And guess what caused the financial crisis? I think we'd all be talking about it. It's hidden. It's not talked about even in election manifestos in terms of what to do to make sure that the bubble won't burst again and how to become resilient. You know, we use this word resiliency, for example, with climate. We're not using it again in terms of making sure that people's incomes are growing. Real wages have not been growing for the last 30 years. Even during the COVID-19 recovery, we had, for example, loans being given out to small companies, to people, help to buy schemes. We're talking mainly here about the West. That's not necessarily what you want to do, just pile on even more debt. So I think, the mission is not the vaccine. The mission is to vaccinate everybody in the world. Currently, we have what Dr. Tedros, the head of the World Health Organization, calls vaccine apartheid. It doesn't have to be that way. You know, why do we continue to allow patents, intellectual property rights, to be used as basically value extraction tools? Patents should be narrow, they should be weak, and they should be more downstream than they currently are. And we've allowed the patent system to basically allow, the value that is coming out of what is really a collective investment effort to be siphoned off by a few companies. Which is really benefiting people. So today, as Shoshana Zuboff says, you think you're searching Google for free, well, Google's searching you for free. That shouldn't be seen as an ex post thought through regulation. We can think about those things ex ante in terms of how we govern co-investment through conditionalities and that kind of shaping towards a direction.
You've tried to find solutions for this through incentives to get it jump-started. What do we need to do now to jump-start a new growth?
We need to dramatically accelerate the investments in decarbonizing all of the critical infrastructures. This is the energy systems, these are the food systems, the transportation systems, the healthcare systems. We can make them more affordable and we can decarbonize them.
It's a moonshot of price of coal, straight up, amid the crises we're in right now, where it is every nation for itself.
And we are going to use Power to X, which is the conversion of green electricity to green fuels. And my prediction is that the demand for green fuel is going to be dramatically higher than the supply over the next 10 to 15 years as companies go down this path. And that sounds, in my business ears, like a great business opportunity.
Deglobalization is the theme here. It seems like everyone's apart or falling apart as well. How does an institution like the IMF incentivize people to begin to solve these problems, but do it within a framework that isn't deglobalization?
Firstly, I think it's important to recognize that every country in the world has benefited from the integration that we have seen. Now, yes.
All of this just remains kind of, as Greta Thunberg says, blah, 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 unless we get serious. And interesting, if you go back to the moon landing, it was really well designed. The first thing that Ernest Brackett did, the head of procurement in NASA, was to change cost plus contracting to fixed price, with a challenge, and then you'd get extra. There were incentives for innovation and quality improvement. So it was like a challenge-based kind of procurement. We often don't do that with normal procurement policy. Sweden does today because they have, for example, a very high-level challenge of a fossil-free welfare state, which then lands on the very particular school lunches, which have to be healthy, tasty, and sustainable. With that kind of target, then the procurement of those school lunches helps to foster sustainability through something as normal as, again, lunch. It's not just big climate strategy and kind of carbon prices. But sorry, just the other thing is they really cared also about the contracts. They had a no excess profits clause in NASA. In other words, we're going to do this together, so we're not going to turn it into a gambling casino.
Yeah. And just so everyone understands, I lived this. My father was directly involved with the Hubble Space Telescope. And this was a raging debate, which I lived at the dining room table over the quality of the contracts.
It's really interesting to go back to the kind of military-industrial complex kind of institutions, which today really need to be much more geared towards our social problems. Bell Labs, which I'm sure you know, was a really important private sector R&D laboratory inside AT&T. It came about in a phase of American kind of history where the government was much more confident. In order for AT&T to retain its monopoly status, it had to reinvest its profits back into the economy, back into innovation, and big innovation beyond telecoms. And that kind of conditionality is something I've become really interested in, because the word conditionality, especially if we think of the kind of IMF conditions, doesn't always inspire great thoughts. But conditions in terms of truly building back better so that every grant, loan, bailout scheme is conditional on actually working together towards something.
Can we all agree that growth comes from technological progress?
Yeah, but Solo's model was about technology as exogenous. What we're talking about is technology as an endogenous function of investment.
How do we get exogenous again, where we get a better good, Jim?
This has put us in a place where we can basically track every single physical item on this planet. And what we need is almost like we need the big dream of a rewired value chain and then work backwards.
Is the rich just try to survive through these selective crises?
We know that there are 75 million more people in extreme poverty in 2021 because of the pandemic. So,
how do we get those institutions and their clients to risk, to take the gambles that Jim is talking about? How do we get the client states of these institutions, including the World Economic Forum, to jump off the cliff into the Mazzucato world? How do we get them to do that?
Well,
You're laughing about it, but it's not happening.
No, the Mazzucato world made me laugh. But Ricardo wrote Principles of Political Economy in 1821. He had a chapter 31 called On Machinery, where he was already looking at what people look at today in terms of what happens with AI and digital tech in terms of workers' wages and employment.